meaning having gone to the other shore. Para means beyond, having gone beyond. Ita is the past passive participle of the verb to go. One of the verbs to go. And so paramita means having gone beyond. And the Tibetans translate that as paro du chimba. So those are somewhat different. Perfect wisdom and transcendent wisdom are a bit different, because the wisdom transcendence has a double meaning. One, it's like the highest level of wisdom, which might be okay for perfect. But the other one is you've gone beyond possessing wisdom, because you've gone beyond the ordinary way of knowing things, because you have merged with all things that are by becoming a Buddha, where you know everything because you are everything. You're sort of like a CAT scan. You've CAT scanned the universe or something like that. So you don't know it in the way we normally think of wisdom or knowledge as a kind of dualistic thing where, I know that's a pillar because I have a word pillar, a concept of a pillar holding up a weight, etc., and it's an external thing to me, and it's a subject-object thing, and maybe there's a secret idea that by knowing the name pillar, I've somehow controlled that. And I've owned that, like, when you know it, when you name something, you kind of own it. There's a whole ancient thing about that. Whereas the wisdom, transcendent wisdom, is definitely, you don't own it, you become one with it. So in a way, it owns you, the universe. Buddha is owned by the universe because he is the whole universe. He identifies with all the other living beings. His enlightenment means like that, right? You are everyone. Like here and how you and I are sitting here looking out of our faces at other people. But if we were Buddhas, we would be all the people simultaneously, which is a weird idea. It's a very strange idea. But we do know that the human beings can identify with one or two other beings. For teammates, mother and child, lovers, brothers, sisters, parents and children sometimes exceptionally. And we know that. I don't know why my eye is irritating. We know that, right? So I follow the Tibetan. I figure that the Sanskrit pundits, Mahayana Sanskrit pundits, and Tibetan masters who translated this into Tibetan, the reason that they chose going beyond is because this is wisdom goes beyond. Generosity that goes beyond. For example, generosity that goes beyond is a kind of generosity combined with wisdom that goes beyond, where you don't perceive yourself as the giver, you don't see the act of giving as something separate from you as the giver, and you don't see the recipient as someone separate from you as a receiver. So therefore, you don't even think of yourself as giving. It's the giving that is just so automatically generous that it's not, it's not like, I gave a gift, like, they should be so happy, they should say thank you, blah, 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 So each one of the different 6 or 10 transcendences is like that. Whereas perfection, so it means like, I got it, it's perfect. I got perfect wisdom, I got perfect this and that. So I think that's not so good. But I haven't managed, it's so stuck in people's minds, they go on and on about perfect wisdom and perfections. So I haven't quite convinced everybody. Probably won't succeed until it's posthumous. Okay. Now, second thing is Bhagavati, the usual word for Buddha, Bhagavan, is one of words for Buddha. Later in Hinduism, it comes to be used for gods. Bhagavan. What it actually means is possessor of Bhaga. Bhaga means a share in its most primal meaning. So in that sense, it means fortune, luck, whatever is desirable, Bhaga. Actually, in some other level, it means vagina, actually, Bhaga, because that's considered a source of fortune, because being's life comes through the vagina. It comes out through the vagina. People are born through that. So Bhagavan has another meaning like that. Anyway, Bhagavati is feminine for that. So Bhagavati is a Mahayana acknowledgement of women as becoming female Buddhas, which is an innovation, actually, in Buddhism, of the Mahayana. It was not thought of by the monks, of the Theravada, that really was the case. Although they had female nuns who could be arhats, which means something like a saint. But to become a Buddha, they never thought that would be the case. But in the Mahayana, they do. And if you note in this text, in the Heart Sutra, when Shariputra asks Avalokiteshvara, he just says, when any noble son wishes to engage in the practice. And when Avalokiteshvara answers, he says, when any noble son or noble daughter. So that's sort of a Theravada Mahayana difference a little bit. Although there are sections in Mahayana literature too where the Indian chauvinism shows itself up and they act like, oh yeah, like in the Vimalakirti, remember we saw the goddess who was wiser than the monk Shariputra, and when he finally recognized that she was wiser, he said, since you're so profound and so deep and have such great understanding, how come you took rebirth as a woman? And then she showed him a thing or two. Remember those of you who were here for the Vimalakirti, and she switched him into being a woman. She swapped consciousnesses with him for a little short while and said, Shariputra, how come you're a woman? And he said, I'm not really a woman, what happened? And she says, well, that's what everybody is, not really a man or a woman, that's the point. There's no eye, no ear, no nose. There's no gender either, Ultimately. Doesn't mean that they don't exist relatively, of course. That's the second thing. Third thing, in the East Asian versions of the Heart Sutra, they actually don't necessarily include the framing. In other words, they don't necessarily say that the Lord Buddha, the Blessed Lord, the Bhagavan, was there and that he went into a samadhi, because in this case, he's not teaching the sutra in a way. He's in a state of concentration, creating a field of awareness of emptiness, illumination of the profound. And in that field, then the dialogue takes place, and Avalokiteshvara, who is considered the incarnation of compassion of all Buddhas, he gives the teaching. Like in the Vimalakirti Sutra, Vimalakirti gives it, but in the field of the Buddha. And that's another element that's nice in the Sanskrit and Tibetan version. Then the 5 body-mind processes. Do you all know what those are? The 5 aggregates, as they're usually called. If you right now reflect about yourself, you have a bunch of material processes, which is your body, right? So that's your body. That's your material aggregate. Actually, the word skanda, a Sanskrit word, literally means a heap. Oh, I know why my eye, because of the cat. I petted the cat. That's why my eye was getting irritated. I was wondering why. What? I often do that. I pet the cat or the dog, and I forget. Never mind. And so there's the material aggregate. And when Buddhists use this in meditation, when they're investigating within themselves to see if there's a self there, in the sense of a fixed identity, that they find that's the real thing that's really them. So they look to the material aggregate, which would depend, of course, by looking through in a meditation. It depends on what sort of an image you have, an anatomical image of your physical processes. Your organs, your circulation, your brain, your spine, your bones, skeleton, etc. You would look through all of that. And so Avalokiteshvara was looking through that when he got into the field of the Buddha's meditation. And then he saw there was no fixed entity called Avalokiteshvara in all his physical processes. Then he went into his sensational processes: pleasure, pain, numbness. You put your 2 fingers together. The 2 surfaces are not obnoxious, so it's kind of pleasant to rub your fingers together. The skin is soft, neither one harms the other one. So it's kind of like that. And then maybe if I have a cracked rib right now, I had an accident two weeks ago. So if I move my arm in the wrong way, I have a pain under my rib, under my shoulder blade. And so that's a painful one. And then we're not thinking about the surface of the thigh. Right now we're sitting on a chair, feel the butt on the chair, feet on the floor, but we're not really thinking about the skin here. So that's the sort of numb. So those are the 3 types of sensations: pleasure, pain, and numbness. And so he then looks through all of the sensations, and that's the basic level of the mind. And he doesn't find any fixed thing, a sensation that's himself, right? Then the next thing are concepts, conceptions, ideas, images, pictures. And at first maybe you think, well, my name, I'm Bob, or I'm Avalokiteshvara, everybody knows that. And he might think Avalokiteshvara was his name, that would be in the aggregate of ideas, terms, images. And maybe he has a picture of himself, like a painting of Avalokiteshvara. But then if he analyzes it, he thinks, well, wait a minute. Was it me yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, whatever, that picture of me? Which picture of me is the real me? And they always change all the time. Then I have an image of, so an image of myself is only just one facet. You can't say that's the real me, that picture, Then similarly, the name, he's Avalokiteshvara, some people call him Lokeshvara, some people call him other things, Cheresig in Tibetan. The name is not really any fixed thing either. And so going through all sort of the cloud of concepts that swirl in our mind, Avalokiteshvara had the experience of not finding any idea or image that was himself, a fixed thing, right? Even Bob seems easier than Avalokiteshvara. But is the Bob, is it in the B or the O or the B? And what does that have to do with me? I can be Robert, I can be Alexander, I can be Tenzing, I can be Thurman, I can be all kinds of things. There's no Bob, there's no like one of those charm bracelets or the little necklaces they wear in high school with their name on it, like Cheryl, like Bob, That's still, there's nothing like that hanging in my heart or brain, right? So that doesn't, so then you drop conceptions. Then you go to the fourth aggregate, which are mental function, emotional willpower, or some deeper ones like sense of time and space, but the deeper mental functions like that. And sometimes when I'm Bob, there's like an emotion of like, I'm really here, I'm really me. But that itself is a changing thing, it's not a fixed thing. It feels very intense sometimes, but it's not a fixed identity that I can say. And finally, then consciousness. Well, then we all have a feeling that there's some point of subjectivity at the deepest place that never changes. We all kind of feel that. We look at a picture of ourselves 10 years ago, and we remember the party or the evening or the day or whatever it was, and then we think we're still there. That was the same exact consciousness there, but actually our consciousness is totally different than it was even yesterday. And there's some similarities, but it's a continuum. It's not like there's one thing that didn't change in the midst of all the things that changed. Because if it didn't ever change, it wouldn't be in the midst of anything. It wouldn't be able to contact, because if it contacted other things that changed, it would change. You follow? Something unchanging can't be in the middle of a bunch of changing things and connect to them, because their changes would change it. It's just logical, right? So then that's the deepest place you get into the consciousness. And in the consciousness, you go down and deep into the subjective consciousness, and you sort of try to, there's a meditation where you turn on the self, and you turn back into yourself, looking for that point that doesn't change. Because even though we can say intellectually there couldn't possibly be such a thing, we still feel there is such a thing. It subliminally controls and guides our perception and our experience, etc. And from Buddha's point of view, it is our biggest problem, actually. Because it's not there, and yet we're trying to maintain that it is there. And that's my identity, it's me, But actually, our identity is a constant, fluid, interconnected thing. Which doesn't mean that it's not important to us in its changing. In fact, it's even more important because it's always changing. Because that means we don't want to expose it to negative influences. We don't want it to change in a bad way. We don't want to let negative emotions take it over and make us nasty and angry and crazy or depressed or, externally or internally in some way harmful. So once you know it's always changing, then you become responsible for shaping its changes. Very importantly. That's why when Buddhist monks, for example, will go to town to get breakfast or lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which they have to eat before noon, traditionally. When they go, they just look at the ground, like 3 or 4 axle lengths or, ahead of themselves. They don't sort of look around when they walk around, because they might see something that would then disturb their mind, If they're feeling like sexually deprived because of being celibate, they might see a beautiful person and then get all wound up for hours and weeks in meditation. It would seize their mind, or if they saw something horrible, then they'd get all freaked out when they're getting very sensitive and meditating. So they just don't look around. They guard against stimuli. It's called guarding the doors of the senses, etc. So those are the 5 body-mind processes: matter, sensation, conception, volition. We coarsely translate, but all mental functions other than those conceptions and sensations, and consciousness. So he looked at them and he realized that the 5 processes, or aggregates as people usually call them, are void of any intrinsic reality. So what that means, it doesn't mean that he looked at them and they disappeared. What it means is he looked at them and he saw that their reality was only relational. Nothing that he could observe within himself, body or mind, was somehow existing as a thing in itself. Out of its existence was out of its own core without relating to other things. They all had no intrinsic reality. That means only relational reality. That's what emptiness means. Everything is empty of a non-relational reality. Right? Which is very different from what we normally think. We think emptiness means it doesn't exist. And actually this sutra can be misinterpreted that way. So then Shariputra gets psychically prodded by Buddha's psychic power into asking him the question. Because otherwise Shariputra's mind is pretty quiet. He's already enlightened to some degree. And he normally would just sit there and enjoy feeling like floating in the Buddha's samadhi. But the Buddha gives him a psychic nudge and he asks a question so that the Avalokiteshvara can teach. So then he says, how do we learn this? The deep, profound transcendence of wisdom. And then he answers with what he just realized. The 5 body-mind processes should be truly realized, devoid of any intrinsic reality. And then this is the shocking non-duality statement. Matter is voidness. Now think about it. Now normally we think, we think voidness, we think emptiness or voidness is like an empty space, a dark empty space. And like we might have an imagination that that's what nothingness is. If people think of nothingness, they think of a dark space. Even though a space is not nothing, actually. Nothingness has no size, it's not a place, it's not there. That's what it actually means. But we still think of it like that, like a dark space. So emptiness is not that. Emptiness, matter itself is emptiness. For example, I take my knuckle and I rap on this chair, wood of this chair arm, and it obstructs the movement of my knuckle, so it bangs on it. So I think, this place is full, it's not empty, it's full of this chair arm, and my knuckle is full of its bone, and so they collide, they can't meet. But actually they are meeting. And because I am influencing this thing by my knuckle, both my knuckle and the chair arm are empty of any non-relational reality. They're only relational. That's why it can bump my knuckle. So matter is voidness means it's not like there's an emptiness inside matter. Like, you might think of an atom as being mostly empty. Matter is voidness means anything either emptiness or solid itself is only relational. There's no thing in itself about either emptiness and emptiness also is empty, they say. It's one of the kinds of emptiness, is the emptiness of emptiness. Okay? So that's a real shocker, matter. People used to translate this as form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And that sort of seems more easy for people, because form is like just a form. It's like a ghost, like some shape or some form, And they were thinking, those Britishers who did that, translated the word rupa as form in this context, they were thinking of Plato, of course, form, like the forms, But therefore matter is correct. Voidness is matter, matter is voidness. Voidness is not other, that's really very profound, because that means that this table, all these differentiated objects, they're all emptiness, which means they're all liberated. They're all nirvana, actually. It means all of this samsara or life cycle or differentiated world of inadequacies and sufferings and things. It actually is nirvana. It's actually that's where the most shattering or shocking non-duality lies. Is that we're already in nirvana. This is nirvana right now. Sorry. That doesn't mean that we're enjoying it like we would be if we knew it was nirvana. So, but it is, the fact that it's a very different approach. It is nirvana, and we don't know it, so we're trying to remove what prevents us from knowing it, rather than, this sucks, it's a horrible world, and nirvana is somewhere else where we're going to go, which is the dualistic idea that the Theravada people think. And Buddha lets them think that, because it's so challenging to say that if you understood where you were right now and what you are right now, you'd realize you've always been in nirvana. And you are nirvana, made of nirvana. Oh, that's good. I'm sorry, my voice, I don't know what happened. Okay. So then, voidness is not other than matter, neither is matter other than voidness. That is the big, shocking, central statement of the sutra. Then he lists here the other four aggregates or processes, right? Sensations, conceptions, mental functions, and consciousnesses. And in a way, it's just an abbreviation, because in the longer Prajnaparamita Sutra, he will say sensations are voidness. Voidness consists of sensations. Sensations are not other than voidness. Voidness is not other than sensations. In other words, he would repeat the same four-way sort of rubbing it in to the mind, non-dualistic statement about sensations, conceptions, mental functions, and consciousnesses. Then he gives, like, all things are voidness, signless, uncreated, unceased, stainless, because uncreated, they're unceased. Since there's no, something that's created is made of parts, they come together, and then they will disintegrate eventually. But when it's uncreated, there are no parts, and it's unceased, therefore. Stainless, impeccable, undecreased, and unincreased. So when Buddha attained his highest attainment in the Tibetan and Sanskrit tradition, he said, Sab shi usel totel dumaje, dudzi tower chuchi kornye, which means profound, peaceful, luminous or clear light, uncomplicated or unelaborated, and uncreated, like an elixir of immortality, is this reality I have discovered. Whoever I show it to, they will not understand it. Better to hang out in the jungle by myself. Have a nice time. Which was just, of course, he didn't really care to do that, but he says that on purpose to get some people to invite him, actually. Being like playing prima donna there. Or not really, he wants Brahma, he wants the God to ask him to teach. Actually. So he's saying, never mind, it's too difficult. Although he then says it isn't that difficult later. Shariputra. Thus in voidness, there are no matter, no sensation, no conception, no mental function, no consciousness. Those again are the 5 skandhas, 5 aggregates. Then you have the 6 senses. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality. Because the mentality is a kind of sense. Then there are objects of the sense. No form or color, no sound, no scent, no taste, no texture, no idea. Those are the 6 objects of the 6 senses. The mental object, the idea, has a mental sense. And they call it 6th sense. There are no sense media. From eye to mentality sense media, and there are no consciousness media from visual to mental consciousness media either. And these mediums are like visual media, audio media, smell media, taste and touch media, and mind media. There are no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death. Those and no cessation of old age and death either. Those are the 12 links of what they call dependent origination, which is the Buddha's way of explaining the way life goes round and round based on its root, which is unenlightened life, which is ignorance. So he's rejecting all those 12 in a short form. And then no suffering, no origination, no cessation, no path. Those are the Four Noble Truths. You all know the Four Noble Truths, right? Everybody knows that now, right? Everybody knows that? That is great. I like that. I won't make a quiz. And then no intuitive wisdom. That's intuitive wisdom. I'm using it for that expression. It's yene sheba. You could say primal wisdom, because if nirvana is uncreated, ultimate reality is absolute and ultimate reality is uncreated. That means it's always been there, and that means when you remove the veils of ignorance and you recognize that it is you, you are in it, it is reality, it is the real reality, and that this is a little bit illusory comparative to that, you simultaneously realize that it was always so, and that in some sense you already knew it always. You follow me? It's like one of those, you ever learn something where when you learn it you feel, oh, I knew that, but I wasn't paying attention or I wasn't recognizing. Do you ever have that experience? I think everyone pretty much has. And that's kind of intuitive thing. It's a directly experienced thing, but it isn't through a circular path. So intuitive wisdom is a wisdom that when you achieve it, you realize you always had it. You follow me? And actually, I think of it even as a kind of intuition, because right now, for example, if anybody was a Buddha, they would see all these discrete photographs of Tibet and the pillar and Tibet House and the statue of Jaya Rinpoche. Oh, very nice. Oh, who put that there? Very good. Of Tsongkhapa. Great master, the Leonardo da Vinci of Tibet, and Maitreya over there, and so on. And but at the same time, one would be completely aware of the emptiness of all of them. At the same time, so they would be seen as reflections in the mirror of emptiness. They use an expression like that. And you know, when you look in a mirror yourself, in the morning you put on your face, a man will shave his face or something, and you look at your face, and you know this is just a reflection in the mirror. And not only that, but your mind will correct the left-right distortion that occurs, and you don't have to think again about that knowledge, because you already experienced that it looks like there's a room in there and there's a person over there whose left and right sides have flipped with yours, otherwise it looks like you. But if you had LR on your face, they would be in the wrong place in the mirror image, right? Left, right. But you know that without thinking. So you intuitively, that's where we use intuitive. We intuitively know that. So intuitive wisdom, then again, has a nice idea that it shows that the wisdom has this double exposure, as the great Nishitani Keiji once said. It has both things. It has the absolute state of nirvanic state and the relative samsaric state simultaneously, right, without conflicting with each other. And Buddha's enlightened mind is like that. Enlightened mind is not what we might think, sort of like just being asleep, unconscious, so not having to worry about anything because doesn't know anything is there. And it's not just being resigned to being in a differentiated world. It's like asleep and awake at the same time. It's in samadhi of clear light and perception of differentiated things simultaneous, both happening at the same time. It's interesting, isn't it? But we do that. It's not impossible. When you look in the mirror, you do that yourself. You know that you're looking just at the details of the thing, but you know that you're not seeing the real thing in the mirror. Without thinking twice, this is a mirror reflection. You don't think it. You intuitively know that. So then you'll correct left, right, and all this. Right? So very good. The mirror simile, nothing is adequate to really create understanding of enlightenment other than the understanding itself. But that's a really good simile, the mirror one. Or sometimes they say the moon reflected in water and all this kind of thing. So, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no media. We did that already. So we did that. So then he says, bodhisattvas without attainment. So no attainment and no non-attainment either. And I'm afraid in the East Asian one, although I'm not, as I recall, or maybe it was just mistranslated, they're using the word wu, wu, Chinese wu, or mu in Japanese, which means no. So they say no attainment and no one to attain. I think they mistranslate this, unfortunately. No attainment and no one to attain. But they already said there's no self, there's no everything. So it's no attainment, but no non-attainment. That's really important. That's more important. No non-attainment means that, like when you attain nirvana, and you attain it, you attain that knowledge by the mode of the kind of knowledge that you attain, that when you attain it, you know you always knew it. If that's the case, then you are going to find out that somewhere you did know it, even though you thought you didn't, if you follow me. And I always like to say, people's cells, people's, subatomic energy patterns, their wave functions, are blissful. People's health is the bliss of their cells. So when people get depressed, they get sick. They shut down the bliss of their cells. And they might be, I'm really unhappy today, or I didn't have this, but if my health is there, it's because my cells like each other. They're all happy to join together, and they're running around being an immune system and doing all kinds of stuff. And they're really happy being the cell in my finger. Even though like my finger's caught in I've been caught in a pair of pliers or something, or I fell on the ice. But I'm even feeling the pain because my nervous system is transmitting the thing, because the nervous system is hanging together because it likes itself. It likes the next cell in it. So this is really important. No non-attainment means that somewhere we know this. Animals and sentient beings know that. But then they're hiding this. They're ignorant. They're misknowing what they know. They're distracted from their knowing at a deep heart level, and they're misknowing everything as a misery, as insufficient, as unsatisfying, as whatever. I mean, nothing is adequate to really describe it all, but that's really nice. So, because the bodhisattva, now you know the word bodhisattva, everybody knows that word, right? Sattva doesn't mean a being. Everyone goes on about beings, but sattva means a hero. So bodhisattva means hero or heroine of enlightenment. It means not just a being of enlightenment, but a hero of enlightenment or a heroine of enlightenment. Someone who has the courage to break into directly knowing something themselves. Because the bodhisattva is without attainment. So in other words, not thinking, I attained something, I have this and that. She lives in reliance on transcendent wisdom. His spirit is unobscured and free of fear. I like to switch the genders back and forth. And free of fear. So there's nothing to fear. Relying on transcendent wisdom means relying on being one with everything. So why should I be afraid of anything? Passing far beyond all confusion, she ultimately succeeds in nirvana. And here that means that she succeeds by attaining nirvana through the path of non-attainment, you could say. But that means realizing she's always been in nirvana. And also you could say succeeds in nirvana because once you know that you're in nirvana and that everything is made of bliss, then you're really able to live your mundane life, interacting with others in the most best possible way. Just like the lady in the Zoloft commercial that I'm always talking about. But I already told you about that, right? I didn't tell you about that? No. Oh, well, everyone knows so easily that when people are happy, they're much more effective. That they have commercial like that. And nobody's ever seen the Zoloft commercial? The Zoloft commercial, there's this lady, this housewife. She's in her kitchen. It's in a suburb because there's a field outside. You can see out the window. And then the dog is doing some mess on the floor. The kid threw his porridge on the floor, threw it on himself. The dad comes in like, where's my coffee? And she's burning a horrible General Mills produced plastic waffle that's going to poison them all and give them cancer anyway. But anyway, she's burning it. And it's smoke is coming out. It's just really a nightmare kitchen in the morning. And she's like, like this. And then you look out the window, the commercial does, and there are these yellow flowers you notice out there in the grass. And then the flowers pop off their stems, they're yellow, and they form the letters Zola. And then you get the idea that she took one. It's one of these mood-altering drugs. And then she feels like good. She's great. So then, bam, the dog is kicked out. The kid is like, has your porridge. The husband, get your own coffee. The waffle, puts a new waffle in there, throws it all out. Bing, bing, bing. The whole kitchen shapes up instantaneously because she feels good. So she can rise to the occasion. So I'm sorry that some of you have heard me do this all off thing, but it just shows that everybody knows that, feeling better, it makes you do better. And so therefore, succeeds in nirvana, she succeeds in nirvana. When you say that, it doesn't just mean to go somewhere else to find nirvana. It means realizing this is nirvana is a tremendous relief because you find the bliss of life, and also you can deal with the situation so much better. Both, that's the meaning. Both mundane and transcendent meaning, you could say. And all the Buddhas who live in past, present, and future, and that's when you become fully enlightened, you're not only identifying with all space and all beings, in geometric space, you're also everywhere in time. And they say when Buddha attained enlightenment before, just at the moment, at the threshold of that, he realized infinite previous lives of himself and all other beings, and he saw all their different potential futures and resolved to remain with them as enfolding a compassion energy around them, that their futures should bring them to their own freedom and release from suffering with the optimal evolutionary effectiveness. So all the Buddhas who live in past, present, and future rely on transcendent wisdom to reach manifestly perfect Buddhahood in unexcelled perfect enlightenment. And that's why the Prajnaparamita is called Bhagavati, the female Buddha, Mrs. Buddha, and she's also called Sarvajina Mata, the mother of all victors, of all jinas, of all champions. Not the breakfast of champions, the mother of champions, all of them. So then there's the mantra. That means, so there's the mantra of transcendent wisdom, the mantra of great science, because knowledge of reality is science. It's not religious belief. When you know reality, you have that is a scientific knowledge. The unexcelled mantra, the uniquely universal mantra, the mantra that eradicates all suffering, is not false, known as truth. Transcendent wisdom mantra and follows. Now, I won't talk about it. I have a complaint about this. Tadyata. Tadyata means as follows. But somehow in Tibet it's crept in where, since they don't know Sanskrit anymore, they think it's part of the mantra. And they go Tadyata. But that's not. You have to have Om at the head of the mantra. Tadyata is just as follows. To wit. Something like that. It's not part of the mantra. But I haven't managed to get that across. That's why Om is in brackets. In a bracket. But anyway, it should be Om, because when you say Om, you're inviting all Buddha's body, speech, and mind to infuse everything wherever you are, or rather you're acknowledging that it does infuse everything. And then Gate, that means gone. And gone means understood. Doesn't mean, because understanding is when you understand the world in a new way, you go into a different world. Changes your world. You go into that new world that now is revealed to you as a different thing from your understanding. And I had a big problem when my translation was translated into Spanish from my Essential Tibetan Buddhism book, because they translated the mantra rather than just recite the syllables. They translated it. It goes, Om puerta, puerta, puerta grande, puerta muy grande, Bodhisattva. Illumination. Swaha. It was a gate. Really, I was upset. Anyway, so that's all I have to comment on about this, I think. Okay? Now, second thing, I gave you this sheet, and the sheet, I think, may not be online for those of you online. It may not be in the readings, but we will put it. Tomorrow, Tenzin Sonam will put it. Because it's 2 pages from my Central Tibetan Buddhism, but it's very useful for those of you who may be still puzzled on a sort of elementary level of the relationship between Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, or Tantra, as it's called, and in the sense that, which are called the 3 vehicles, and I'm saying that like styles of Buddhism in India, how they came in sort of 500-year increments. Because although the Buddha taught all of them according to the Mahayana Buddhists and the Vajrayana Buddhists, the Buddha, and a lot of the Theravada ones too, and Theravada also is only 8 out of 18 of the what are called the Nikaya, or the monastic Buddhists, the dualistic Buddhists. The other branch of them is called the Mahasangika, and then they have sub-branches, total of 18 branches of dualistic Buddhists. Dualistic meaning thinking that nirvana is something else, and this is samsara, and those are 2 different things. That's what's meant by dualistic. But still, when the Buddha taught everything, even in those people who say he taught all of these, they say that when he did teach the Messianic Buddhism, or the Universal Vehicle, or Mahayana Buddhism, and when he taught the apocalyptic style of Buddhism, the magical Tantric Buddhism, he said, I don't want people studying this in general in this culture, in my Indian society, for 500 years or so, 400 or 500 years. I want them to stay dualistic, in other words, to realize they need to leave the world, they need to withdraw from it, because non-dualism can be misunderstood too easily to mean it's kind of all one, and therefore there's nothing to be done with it. It's just the way it is. So it can be misunderstood easily, non-dualism. Because non-dualism is oneness and duality combined. It's not just oneness. We have a term, monism. And a little bit the Vedic culture, or Vedist culture before Buddha's time in India, which is different from Hindu culture, because Hindu combined some aspects of that Vedist culture with the Buddhist and Jain level of culture, which was very anti-Vedist. So they combined them. Hinduism does. Hinduism is like half Buddhism, if they only knew. But Vedism was not. And that Vedism was kind of monistic, because it said everyone is one with the whole universe, is the one, but they're their own piece. But they're just inevitably the piece they are in the universe. And then they can try to improve their position in the universe, but there's no escape from fulfilling their role in the universe. They're just stuck with that. And then the Buddha's time in the Axial Age, 5th century BCE, 6th century, 7th century, whenever exactly, nobody knows for sure exactly when, but approximately mid-first millennium before the Common Era. That sort of idea of the one cosmos that we're all part of, and therefore if you're somehow in a lowly position, never mind, because you're the feet of God. You're the knees of God. You're if you're a merchant, you're the belly of God. If you're a warrior, the arms of God. And if you're a Brahmin priest who knows the Vedas, you're the brain of God, or the mind of God, the mouth of God. But still, whatever it is, so you don't change, you don't worry about your place. You accept your place in a monistic thing. Whereas a non-dualistic thing, every single person can become God, actually. There are differences in hierarchies in societies, but there's no absolute untouchability, absolute Brahmanhood, absolute warriorhood, absolute merchanthood, absolute lowly anything. Every individual has access to nirvana, therefore has ultimate value. It's a real shattering moment, 5th century, Eurasia-wide at least, and we don't know quite how to track it in sub-Saharan Africa, Australia, and in the Americas. We're not sure what was happening at that time, but I think it was a planetary thing, personally. But it's hard to get evidence from those other areas. So if you look at this scheme, you will see that these were the three waves that Buddha released himself, but they broke on the shore of Indian civilization in 500-year increments, something like that. I could go over in detail, but I don't want to, because there's no India, and there's no Buddhism, and there's no wave. Because we're doing Prajnaparamita. In the Vimalakirti, which we looked at last week, was it last week? Yeah. In the Vimalakirti, the part where he talks to Manjushri about how to console a bodhisattva, about how the bodhisattva's body is not owned by their personality, because they can't find their personality. And then if they look at their body, then it dissolves under analysis also. And so, since it dissolves under analysis, you can't find, I shouldn't have opened to this, the wrong thing. Somebody sent me an email, quiet. And so that's the thing. Here's my text, yeah. The present Paramita text. So, right. So that's how I heard. Now we have the 8,000. Now among the longest of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, Transcendent Wisdom Sutras, is 100,000 lines or verses, what they call shloka in Sanskrit. But some people will translate verse, some people will translate line, because of the kind of manuscript way they wrote. And that's a really long one. That is the real original mother of all Buddhas, because that one, every time they say no, like no mind, no eye, no ear, they say no intrinsically real eye, no intrinsically real ear, no intrinsically real tongue, no intrinsically real body, no intrinsically real matter, etc. They go on like that. So they put the qualifier all the time. That's why it's 100,000 lines. The short one, they just say no, no eye, no ear. And you have to supply the qualification if you know what it means. And therefore it could lend itself to misunderstanding as being something nihilistic, which it isn't. So then the shortest one is not the Heart Sutra. The shortest one is one syllable. Can anybody guess what syllable? What? Oh, you knew that already. Yeah, not long short Those are two different letters in Sanskrit. And are two different ones. But the short it's just emptiness in a way, because the means, and therefore it's creativity. It's both emptiness and creativity. We have the word amoral, aniconic, atheistic. There the means not. It's a negation. That's like emptiness is a negation. But then, in the Indian cosmology, the universe doesn't begin in a big bang. It begins in a big Because when it is in a state of pralaya, or dissolution, what is there is not a bunch of matter lying around like little billiard balls or whatever, little electrons or something, according to them, or a bunch of big black holes or little black holes. I don't know whether they're little or big. They don't either know that, because they compress everything into minuscule things, so maybe they're little. But that's not what's lying around. What's lying around are a bunch of consonants with no sound. And consonants with no sound, with no vowels, cannot articulate forms and shapes, and things cannot be created. Like you can't say the letter ga without the vowel that departs from the mouth position. The consonant is just some position of the mouth. Ga, right? Like by itself, the ga makes no sound. So becomes, it's Brahma actually, God, in the Indian cosmology. And then that comes and it sweeps up all the consonants, and then it makes the universe. And it's helped out by I and U. It's the short I and the short U. I, U. A and O are not really part of that primary thing, because A is A plus I, and O is A plus U. And then they have I and Ow. which are long ah plus u. So it goes, they were brilliant. Oh, I just fell in love with it when I discovered Sanskrit. I realized how utterly tacky A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K is. Backward alphabet. So that's the shortest one. So then the Heart Sutra is fairly short also. And then the one that somehow in Buddhist cultures got so much respect, because it's kind of a middle way, is called the 8,000 line one. And that's the one of the ones that Edward Conson did try to translate, but I consider it only partial translating, but a lot of Sanskrit words and whatever, and this perfection business and whatever. And there is some young guy who's trying to retranslate it nowadays, and he was supposed to do it 3 years ago, and I think he fell into it. I don't know what happened to him. I lost track of him. I will find out. I know someone who knows him. I'll find out what happened. But because I know him because when I heard that he was commissioned by someone to do a new translation. Actually, I was ordered to do a translation myself by a bunch of very distinguished Japanese scholars, Buddhism scholars who passed away since then. And they made me take a vow, actually, over like a big bunch of sake to translate this text properly into English. And I said, what do you mean, Collins had translated? Why are you bugging me? They said, that's not translation, they said. And so I said, when I retire, I will. But then this young guy does it, that's great. That's one less thing for me to do, but I don't know, he fell into a hole or something, I don't know what. Anyway, it begins like all Buddhist texts. Thus have I heard at one time. And at least he puts the at one time in the right place. But I don't like, thus I have heard at one time. Remember, in mine I said, thus did I hear on a certain occasion, right? On a special occasion, right? Why is that at the beginning? Evam maya shruttam ekasmin samaye. And samaya doesn't just mean time, samaye, it means a certain meeting time. Samaya means to come together. So at a certain occasion, some things come together. And special means, why is it special? Because Buddha was there. And when you say, thus I have heard, it's sort of like hearsay, well, I just heard it, well, I heard it around, I heard it somewhere. I even know somebody who, I regret to say one of my students, who tried to go say, once upon a time. I was really freaked out. Like a fairy tale. But the point is that this goes at the beginning of a discourse of an incident in the Buddha's teaching career. And the reason for the evam maya shruttam ekasmin samaye means at a certain coming together with the Buddha, a special coming together with the Buddha, I did hear like this, which means thus, right? Evam. And that means that's a certification of authenticity. So it's really, and it means this really was happened, this really was spoken, relatively really, because of course it's relative, but thus did I hear it on a special occasion. I think it's better, but thus have I heard at one time. At least he puts the one time with the hearing, not with where the Lord was living. So the Lord, again, he's translating Lord as Bhagavan, and my son. It doesn't really mean Lord, it means the lucky one. I think the early translators would translate Bhagavan as Lord, because they noted that the Hindus around were going Bhagavan, about the gods, without thinking what it meant. So then Lord, you have the idea of Lord. But my son alerted me that it's kind of like a feudal concept of Lord, like lording it over, But meanwhile, the Buddha's the luckiest. He's the lucky guy, Bhagavan. He has the bhaga. He has the share. He has the fortune. So he's the fortunate one, really, is what it is. He's more fortunate. He's not like he's a lord over people. There is a word Jinnah, which means a victor, like a champion. There are lots of names of Buddha. But the Lord is sort of imports a kind of landlord kind of idea from Western authoritarian society. It is not good. This is when they say blessed Lord, it's at least he's a Lord who has a blessing. That's okay. A little bit better. But I like to use Bhagavan anyway. Dwelt at Rajagriha on the Vulture Peak, together with a great gathering of monks, with 1,250 monks, all of them arhats. The arhat means one who has attained nirvana of a dualistic type. In other words, they've had the experience as if they floated away into another universe where it was all peaceful and blissful. And then they come back, and they're back in their bodies, and they think they're just going to be there for a while. When they die, they're going to stay in that blissful place, because they think nirvana is some other place, somewhere else. So they're kind of arhat. That's called arhat. Their outflows dried up, contaminations dried up, undefiled, fully controlled, quite freed in their hearts, well freed and wise, thoroughbreds, great serpents, he translates naga as, I think, great dragons, rather. Their work done, their task accomplished, their burdens laid down, their own weal accomplished. He loves that word. At least it's better than welfare. Their own weal, W-E-A-L, accomplished, with the fetters that bound them to becoming extinguished, their hearts well freed by right understanding, in perfect control of their whole minds, with the exception of one single person, the Venerable Ananda. That was the Buddha's closest disciple and actually his cousin. But he was so much, serving the Buddha and so close to him. He was an idiot savant, so he could remember whatever Buddha said. If he talked for 2 hours, he could repeat it verbatim. He had that power, memory power. So then the Bhagavan said to the Venerable Subhuti, and Subhuti is the one who was always talking in the Prajnaparamita, the elder. He's a monk, but he's very wise about the transcendent thing. Make it clear now, Subhuti, to the Bodhisattvas, the great beings, the great heroes, it should be, starting from perfect wisdom, how the Bodhisattvas, the great heroes, go forth into perfect wisdom. Thereupon the Venerable Shariputra thought to himself, will that Venerable Subhuti, the elder, expound perfect wisdom of himself through the operation and force of his own power of revealing wisdom, or through the Buddha's might? So, in other words, is he going to be channeling Buddha here, or is he going to just make it up himself? He's suspicious, The Venerable Subhuti, who knew through the Buddha's might, he had a little borrowed clairvoyance, that the Venerable Shariputra was in such wise discoursing in his heart, said to the Venerable Shariputra, whatever Venerable Shariputra, the Lord's disciples, teach, all that is to be known as the Tathagata's work. Tathagata means one who has realized suchness. That means one who's realized reality. Tathagata. That's one of Buddha's names. It's a nice one. Tathagata. And some people translate it as thus gone. I don't know why. They think people will understand that. Like he's just... But it sounds sort of like hipster language. Thus gone. He's the thus gone one. Tathagata. I used to translate it to transcendent because tata means suchness. And suchness, realize, you say the suchness of this table means that this table is like itself, which means it's not quite itself. So suchness indicates the transcendentality of the table. There's a thatness is another expression for ultimate reality, which is where the ultimate reality is inherent in the table. That's the thatness of the table. So suchness and thatness are a little bit different. Because such means, such as this, means it's not this, it's like this. So everything is sort of like itself, but it's illusory that it's itself. See, and that's where you're saying, by seeing something, your mind is flipping over to the knowledge that it's, your intuition that it's on the mirror surface of emptiness, that it's simultaneously not there. But when you say thatness, that means that it's just there because emptiness is that. So the mind is going two different directions with suchness and thatness. But most of my colleagues mix the two up. So, Tathagata means one who's gone to, one who realized suchness. So, said to the Venerable Shariputra, whatever Venerable Shariputra, the Bhagavan's disciples teach, all that is to be known as the Tathagata's work. For in the Dharma demonstrated, in the teaching demonstrated by the Tathagata, they train themselves. They realize its true nature. They hold it in mind. Thereafter, nothing that they teach contradicts the true nature of things. whatever those sons of good family, it should be noble sons, noble children, may expound as the nature of dharma, that they do not bring into contradiction with the actual nature of dharma. So he's saying you can rely on them. Shariputra, he's saying. So now the extinction of self is the next paragraph that Kansa's little title for the paragraph. It's not in the original. Thereupon the Venerable Subhuti, by the Buddha's might, said to the Bhagavan, the Bhagavan has said, make it clear now, Subhuti, to the Bodhisattvas, the great heroes, starting from transcendent wisdom, how the Bodhisattvas, the great heroes, go forth into transcendent wisdom. He's quoting Buddha. So then now Subhuti himself says, when one speaks of a quote bodhisattva, unquote, what thing does that word bodhisattva, unquote, denote? I do not, Lord, see that thing, bodhisattva, nor a thing called transcendent wisdom. Since I neither find nor apprehend nor see a thing, quote bodhisattva, unquote, nor a, quote, perfect wisdom, unquote, or quote, transcendent wisdom, unquote, what bodhisattva shall I instruct and admonish in what perfect wisdom, what transcendent wisdom? And yet, O Bhagavan, if, when this is pointed out, a bodhisattva's heart does not become cowed, nor stolid, nor does not despair, nor despond, if he does not turn away or become dejected, does not tremble, is not frightened or terrified, it is just this bodhisattva, this great hero, who should be instructed in perfect wisdom, in transcendent wisdom. It is precisely this that should be recognized as the transcendent wisdom of that bodhisattva, as his instruction in transcendent wisdom. When he thus stands firm, that is his instruction and admonition. Moreover, when a bodhisattva lives in transcendent wisdom and develops it, he should so train himself that he does not pride himself on that thought of enlightenment with which he began his career, spirit of enlightenment with which he began his career. That spirit is no spirit. Since it's an essential original nature, spirit is transparently luminous. So, in other words, at the same time as he talks about these things, everything gets stripped away. And that's the Transcendent Wisdom Sutra is really, really, really like that. It's very, very like that, constantly. In fact, if you know the schools of Buddhism in China and then Japan, you know the Tiantai school in China was based on the Lotus Sutra. The Huayan school was based on the Avatamsaka flower or flower ornament sutra. The Pure Land school, of course, was based on the Pure Land Sutras. There are several of them, you know, the visionary worlds of Amitabha and so on. And the Zen people's big thing was, we are the no sutra school. We don't have a sutra. But if you read the history of the Zen or Chan in China, the sixth patriarch and these different people attained their satori's, you know, their enlightenment, hearing the Prajnaparamita, because that is the sutra of no sutra. And you know, I think I did the thing with you about the nose, right? Have I done that with you all? The thought experiment about your nose. I know you. I know she knows everything better than me. But did I do that with you? Everyone? No. So this is the thing, you see. Right in the Heart Sutra it said, "No, I know your no nose." Right. Now you think you can find your nose, correct? Boom, that's my nose. But actually, anytime you touch anything, it's really not your nose. Every part of your nose is not your nose. Because, you know, someone could take that off, you'd still have a nose. Then you can't find the boundary between the nose and the cheek, the nose and the air and the nostril, the nose and the brow. And if you took a microscope, you couldn't find the surface of the nose, the skin. It looks like the Grand Canyon, the pores do, if you look like that. So where is the actual line that is nose and not nose? It's almost impossible to say. So if you meditate, and then, for example, you might get all mathematical. You might go mathematical on this and say, well, there's an infinite number of points on this nose. They're all nose points, and they're really there. But as you know, a point has no size, so it's not there, actually. Every point on your nose is not on your nose, because a point to be a point can't have a size. So therefore, it has no, it's just a position. But even that, You can't say where it is because it's no size. So it's not there. So you do thought experiments like that, and it just seems like sort of wordplay or sort of tricky semantics or something, of course, when you first hear about it. However, if you really meditate on it and think about it and do that thought experiment with great concentration, you can have an experience of noselessness. It will dissolve under analysis. And in fact, the Buddhists predicted thousands of years before quantum physics that there is no thing in the universe that does not dissolve under analysis. Everything dissolves under analysis. Because once it's made of parts, it can be disintegrated. And if you do that thought experiment about your own nose often enough, and with enough one-pointed concentration, you can develop X-ray vision and see through your nose. You can, actually. They insist that you can. The mind is so much more powerful than we're allowed to believe in our materialist culture. From the Buddhist cultural point of view, from Buddhist science point of view, you can actually see through things. Buddha predicted that the infinite divisibility of the atom thousands of years ago, and his prediction has proven correct. So he is therefore a very successful scientist. So that's kind of the thing, that the Prajnaparamita goes round and round and goes on all kinds of things. So anyway, that's the thing. Then there's a very nice thing. Actually, I put a version of this Kanza thing on the sources for this class. But since I did, I found a better scan, a better internet pirated version of it that is easier to read, and I'm going to substitute this for that. Actually, my son found it for me today here on the net. I didn't notice it. In East Asia, a lot of these English translations have been pirated and put on the net, which is fine, actually. They feel it belongs to Buddhism. Everyone should have access to it. But before that, Kanza does translate this Ratnaguna Samjaya Gata. That is the verses or the hymn that brings together the jewel excellences of the Prajnaparamita. And it's very nice, And it's in verse, in Sanskrit. It's call forth as much as you can of love, respect, and faith. Remove the obstructing defilements and clear away all your taints. Listen to the transcendent wisdom of the gentle Buddhas, taught for the weal of the world, for heroic spirits intended. And then I always remember this simile, which I like very much. The rivers all in this rose apple island, that he's thinking of India, of course. They call it Jambudvipa, the Indian subcontinent, which causes the flowers to grow, the fruits, the herbs and trees. They all derive from the might of the king of Nagas, dragons or serpents or whatever you want to call it, Naga, from the dragon residing in Lake Anavatapta, his magical power. So that's a lake at the base of Mount Kailash, just north of the Tibetan border. Current Tibetan border, but really spiritually in India. And the fantasy is that lake is the source of all the rivers that come down into the subcontinent. Brahmaputra, Indus, Sutlej, Ganges, Yamuna, all of them. Karnali, and Indus, and that, so there's the fantasy that there's a big dragon there in that lake, and there's no bottom to the lake because the dragon's body goes all the way out to the ocean, so across the whole continent, and somehow all the waters of the oceans come up through the dragon and flow down in the rivers, type of thing. Just so, whatever teachings the victor's disciples established, that's the Buddha, whatever they teach, whatever adroitly explain concerning the work of the holy, which leads to the fullness of bliss, and also the fruit of this work, it is the Tathagata's doing. For whatever the victor has taught, the Tathagata victor, just names of Buddha, the guide to the Dharma, to the teaching. His pupils, if genuine, have been well trained in it. From direct experience derived from their training, they teach it. Their teaching stems but from the might of the Buddha and not their own power. And then he says, no wisdom can we get hold of, no highest transcendence, no bodhisattva, no spirit of enlightenment either. When told of this, if not bewildered and in no way anxious, a bodhisattva lives in the bliss Lord's wisdom. So that was that. Okay, let's meditate a little bit now together. I said I would meditate. So I'm fine, but when the rib kills me when I hold this out here like that. The body is so amazingly woven together. Okay, so let's meditate. Now, one thing that we should always do when we meditate is we should, and this is a Tibetan practice, but I think it's very valuable, and it used to be done in India. And indirectly, it's done even in Zen centers and other places. But there they do it because you sit in a certain kind of meditation room. And the room inspires you in a certain way so that you change your setting when you meditate to be inspiring. So some of us may meditate in the closet. I used to. We may meditate in the field, we meditate here and there. So whenever you meditate, though, you should do the following steps. And that is, one, of course, you sit up in a certain posture. I'm not going to go over that because you probably all know that. You all know that posture. And you know that, you sit with a cross-legged, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of you know that. So, but then mental posture is you turn your awareness upon yourself. That is to say, like if you had a camera lens that was on a goosenecked thing, your consciousness, you look back into your own face. Your mind's eye is like on a gooseneck. You look into your own face and body and brain and mind. And you want to look at your real self, your identity, that which is just the same point in you that is the real you. You subliminally have been assuming. And when you do that, you sort of get a little dizzy because you're sort of outside yourself looking in, and yet when you turn, it's like a dog chasing its tail. The subjective unchanging point that you subliminally assume you have turns to look at you, so naturally it can't see itself. So you spin around a little bit. And when you spin around like that, you get a little dizzy. And when you get a little dizzy, that's good. You don't be afraid of that. You let yourself kind of slide into that. And you kind of let go of your strong sense of up, down, left, right, me, other. And you sort of swirl around and sort of let yourself go a little bit. I mean, don't conk out, don't pass out, but you just sort of release holding yourself as any certain thing in any certain place, in any certain way, including the place you're in. Because after all, your self-definition also has to do with the environment that you're in, which you also think you know what it is. You know who you are, you know what it is. We habitually assume. Okay? So you let all of that go. and you're just sort of floating there in space. But then you command yourself. I'm going to find out some insight. I want to understand better myself and the world. I'm not just content to float. So then you mobilize your intelligence and you emerge from the kind of relaxed dizziness, impelled, floating in space feeling. And you arise in your ideal, alert, focused, intelligent, meditation focus persona for now. So your ideal meditative feeling you have. And then you remember that since the universe, I mean, you may not know that because this is a Buddhist cosmology, but you just sort of allow yourself to experimentally feel that. The universe is beginningless. That's a very key breakthrough away from the Genesis feeling that we have that it started in one place at one time. Aristotle's uncaused cause or first cause, this kind of thing. Forget about that. You just let your mind go backwards infinitely. No chicken and no egg. Always just a chicken and egg. It's not really an issue. But the beginninglessness of it all is very liberating and empowering. So since it's beginningless, it also might be endless. So we think about what we'd like the next blocks or the next things to be. So then, since there's beginningless, there have been infinite numbers of past Buddhas, beings who are achieved the body of reality, Dharmakaya, body of truth or body of reality realization, meaning they expanded their sense of self-identification to such a degree that they have identified with the entire universe, in infinite universe actually, in time and space. So that means that those infinite Buddhas are all present right here in a subtle form where we normally cannot perceive them. So what we're going to do is imagine that Shakyamuni Buddha, since he's the teacher of the Heart Sutra, he's the teacher of the indirectly and directly teacher of the 8,000 Sutra. He taught Shunyata, first of all. He taught wisdom and compassion and liberative art or liberative technique, skill and means, whatever you want to call that, upaya. So we imagine that that Buddha is in the sky, in our mind's sky above us. So you think of this host of Buddhas in embodiments that you can relate to, that you can see, as being in a heavenly choir in the sky above you. And from their bodies and from their smiles, and they recognize you, and they welcome you to your meditation, And they're happy that you're meditating on these valuable thoughts and ideas and insights and self-investigations. And so light rays flow from them to energize you. And the brilliant rainbow light rays drive away any darknesses in your mind of doubt, anxiety, worry, confusion, puzzlement. And you feel slowly you're coming to glow in the light of blessing of all the infinite numbers of beings of past, present, and future who have come to perfect, unexcelled enlightenment. So that's the setup that you make. And now, you look at your material aggregate. And you look through it. And you see if in your material processes you can find whatever your sense of your own anatomy and your own function is. Whatever degree of sophistication and refinement you can bring to it. You look to see if there's a real something there that's the real you. Is there a DNA molecule that's just specifically yours? Or something like that. A barcode, a little homunculus, a little mini you. If you look carefully through all your material processes, sift them through, you pretty soon will come to where you don't find anything in them that's sort of really you. In a way, you could say the whole aggregate of them kind of adds up to being your body. But you can, in thought experiment, you can start to dissect yourself. And you could lose a digit of your finger, you could lose a little bit of skin in a scrape, you could lose a little blood in a cut. You could, all kinds of things can happen to you, and yet you still feel it'd be you, but all of those things that you lost didn't make you not you. So you do thought experiments around this. And pretty soon, you will come to feel that the body that you take so much for granted sort of comes apart under analysis. And then you can, when you get there, you start to look at the sensations, the inventory, how you feel, what you feel. Then you look in your ideas and images. Do you have an image of yourself that you feel is the real you? When was it taken? How do you remember yourself? We always look at our photos and we're disappointed. We feel we look better than that in that time, and probably we did. And the point is, we're always changing. So then that gets rejected as being the real you. That image of yourself. If you have an image of your face, the ideal image of your face, when you're in the photo in which you look the best that you've ever looked. Where is that face now? You can't reproduce it. You can't find it. You can describe it by movement of muscles, by this and that, but actually you can't really retrieve it. It's a delusion. Then you go to your emotions, your will powers.
when you take up any object and try to pin down any of its parts, what it is made of. And we're very fortunate in the modern era that we have the quantum people who have analyzed and have finally gotten rid of the idea about 100 and some years ago of the indivisibility of the atom. So we can sort of plug that into our thought experiment. And here is where there's a great experience can be achieved. It's not too terribly difficult to achieve, but it takes a lot of perseverance. And when you do this kind of thought experiment enough times, eventually you will come into a place where everything seems to disappear. And when you really deeply get there, you will be frightened, because you worry that maybe you will disappear. You know, no eye, no ear, no nose, no you, no self, no body, no mind, no non-mind, no non-body, go on like that. And there's what's called the space-like equipoised samadhi you attain. And you really can kind of have an experience of disappearing. The threshold when you're really going to have that experience is a moment of fear that maybe you'll never come back. You'll get lost. You won't know who you are. You're surrendering your grip as a subjectivity over all the objects on your environment. There's a kind of fear of nothingness like that. And the only way past that is to realize that you can't disappear into nothing, because there's no such place. Nothing is exactly not there. So you're just having a feeling. You're getting so deeply into your own sense of presence that you sort of give up looking for it. And yet there's no one who has the result. You dissolve, actually. You have an experience of dissolving. And it's called the space-like equipoised samadhi. Samadhi. Dhi means thought or intelligence. Dhi, D-H-I. Ah means focused on something. And sam means totally. So it's sam thoroughly. So it's samadhi. Your mind becomes totally focused on space. And you become like, and when you really achieve that, after you get past the flicker of the tension and the fear of becoming nothing, of losing yourself in the abyss of nothingness, you feel actually like released. It's like more powerful than falling asleep. You remain conscious, but everything disappears. And your consciousness, in a way, cannot find itself. And it's like you break into freedom. But here, then, there's a very important thing. There's this tendency, the grasping mind wants to grasp this state of space like equipoised, equal balanced samadhi, concentration. Like you become this vast space. It wants to grasp that as like you hit the absolute. This is the absolute. And if you had a dualistic idea about nirvana, you might think it was nirvana. You might think that it's your state of disappearance. And you're not thinking in words at this point. but that you sort of solidly arrived at the final deepest destination, the space-like equipoise samadhi. So, but if you do this properly, your critical inquiry, wisdom, consciousness, meditative wisdom, meditative consciousness, no longer looking for yourself, but it's sort of pattern of analysis and pattern of probing and pattern of drilling down kind of continues, where you drill down without thinking verbally, because you lost that at this point. But the momentum makes you evaluate the sense of space, the infinite spaciousness that you feel. And then you sort of up, down, before, after, in, out, left, right. The space itself will shatter and fragment. Yes, Meta. It's our new cat mascot, Tibet House mascot. And what will happen then is the space, the state of disappearance will disappear. And things will, the differentiated things, your body, your sense of subjectivity, even your verbal thinking pattern, your concentration pattern, and the objects around you and other people and things and beings, and all return. But if you had, depending on how deeply you disappeared, when they return, they seem kind of transparent and illusory. They kind of seem like reflections in a mirror, in the mirror of that disappearance, of the shiny disappearance. It's kind of like a mirror surface. Although they really seem to come back, and that's called the dreamlike or illusion-like aftermath samadhi or post-attainment samadhi. So it's a new, now more complex concentration where you're perceiving yourself and other things differentiated, but somehow you perceive them as embraced within the memory of that they disappeared when you pressed down on any one point within that field. So the illusory quality of the field, but the field seems sharp and distinct, actually, and the differences between things, and this is self and that's other, and boundaries come back, and so on. And precisely because it almost seems like it used to seem to you, but now you know that if you press at any point, it will dissolve. That's why it's illusory. It seems that's the illusion part of it. Like when you look in the mirror, it looks like there's a three-dimensional room in there in the mirror, like it's a window into another room, which is actually the same room you're in, but you're seeing it from another perspective. Looks like that. But now you know the illusory nature of that perspective in the mirror reflection, because you've seen it, you examined the mirror surface and there's no such space. You bumped into it, right? So then there is this process of there's no attainment and no non-attainment either. So you're beginning to develop the doubly exposed cognitive dissonance, embracing or tolerant and then embracing consciousness. Ding. You have a question?
No.
Oh, you were just, you're a ring. Wingman. Any questions?
I have a question. I guess I've heard some translations where Abba
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yeah,
So I've chanted the Heart Sutra
yes,
in a shorter form in English and in Japanese. I've
Yes.
practiced Zen, which has like a more abbreviated form. I've heard a translation where Avalokitesh is the compassionate bodhisattva. Is that
what, passionate?
compassion?
Oh, compassion, yeah,
But-
that's
but
what he
it's-
is. He's considered the incarnation of the compassion of all Buddhas.
Is that in the original translation, though? The word, I mean, that's the name.
Avalokiteshvara, it's in the name. Well, I mean,
It's in
that's
the
what he's
name.
considered. And the name contains that meaning.
Right.
Ishvara means God, actually. Like in Hinduism, Maheshvara, Maha Ishvara, the great God, means the creator God, for the people who believe in that. And the name Avalokita, and Avalokita means who looks down with concern. So it's sort of a transition in Indian history, this idea, based on the Bodhisattva idea, the Buddha idea, that this is a divine being who's not a creator, but who looks at you in the creation with love and compassion. And love means, and compassion means, that due to that enlightenment, that being wants you not to suffer, wants you to be happy. Compassion means wants you not to suffer, and love means wants you to be happy. And actually, it's a double thing, because that Avalokiteshvara said it was already a Buddha, actually, but then he decides to remain as a bodhisattva, to be more like us, to be with us. It's a very deep and interesting meaning. And there's the story of Avalokiteshvara, the legend of him in the sutra. Do you know that one? Well, in that sutra, he got very gung-ho. And he was with his teacher, the Buddha Amitabha, which means boundless light. And he said to Amitabha, I'm going to go meditate love and compassion on those beings, those human beings, those divine beings, any kind of beings, so hard and so long until they all become happy and they shape up. And then he did that for like a really long time. And then at one point he cried because he saw that beings were still suffering and they were doing things that would make them suffer more, and they were harming each other. Oh yeah, that's right. When he made the vow, he said, and if I should ever get discouraged in that meditation of mine to bring all beings into happiness with me, if I should ever get discouraged, may my head be shattered and my body be wrenched in 1,000,000 pieces, torn in 1,000 pieces. So then he cried. He was almost discouraged. He cried. But then before he became completely discouraged, the two tears turned into two taras, the dark green one and the white one. And then they said, don't be discouraged. Naturally, you can't really affect change in the welfare of beings because you're just a guy. And you're like, as usual, as a guy, you're just not that capable. But we're going to help. So just cheer up, So then he meditated more than with the help of the taras. And then finally, he got discouraged. And when he did, he was torn in all these thousands of pieces, all scattered all over the hillside. And then Amitabha, then he called out one of the pieces, I guess the tongue, called out and said, Amitabha, what happened? I'm like a mess, help. So Amitabha came down apparently and said, be careful what you wish for. Whatever it is, it will happen to you sooner or later. And then blessed him. And then the many pieces, he had these 10 heads, right? And then the many pieces of the body became those 1,000 arms, that you see. So that's the Avalokiteshvara legend. But although there's a famous Zen thing where it says, 1,000 is just a number. That compassion is in every atom. So it's like million, zillion, infinite arms that reach into every atom everywhere. Anyway, well, why did you ask about that?
Well, I think that in this translation, I always had this, when I chant the Heart Sutra,
Yeah.
I always have this 1,000, 1,000 arms.
Yeah, you think about that.
Right, but I think in this...
But here he's just in a humanoid
right,
form.
Exactly. I think in this
It's not the translation, it's just the way
It's
it's.
just a different perspective.
Yeah, someone like that can appear. See, this is a crazy thing that the Buddhists have. The way they understand reality is that it's really great stuff. It's like sci-fi. So when you become a Buddha, like, did you ever wish, if you had relatives in a country, and there's some, like Syria, well, I wish I was 1 million people, or 10 million people there, and we all had like invulnerable armor and, infinite number of food and a force field around us so they couldn't shoot us, and just go there and like anybody who's violent, we would just put them to sleep, not kill them, just put them to sleep. And then when they woke up, they'd be sitting in a chair and we'd be chatting with them about why is it they want to kill all these other people? What is the story? And Mr. Assad, we'd be telling him, why are you why do you want to like rule a country after you've killed everybody in it? What do you want that for? Just because you don't have a very well developed chin. Why is it you want to like go and kill everybody? What's your problem? Hey, let's go to a plastic surgeon and give you a nice chin. You can become a movie star, whatever, What's your problem? You have a sex problem? What is it? And then he wants to like call Putin, where's the Russians? Let's bomb this guy. And he can't, So did you ever wish you could do like that? But the Buddha can do that. Although then I get mad because why isn't he doing it in this and that place? But apparently he is doing it in a lot of places. Gandhi, without knowing about Buddhism particularly, Gandhi did say one wonderful thing when he was in the movie, actually, and I think it's in his Experiments with Truth to Story that the writer of the movie took it. One of the strikes that he called nonviolent strikes, then some people in the strike got upset and got over agitated, over angry, and they burned down a police station and killed a dozen policemen or something. So then he called off the whole thing. And then the lady said to him, well, do you get very, very discouraged when things don't work out like this? And so he said, no, he didn't. But of course he acted when something like that happened. He called things off and he calmed things down. But she said, well, why don't you get discouraged? He said, well, in that one place, in this vast country with hundreds of millions, in those days there's only hundreds of millions in India. Now there's a billion plus, but then there's hundreds of millions at that time. And he said, 12 people were killed and the other horrible, also other people were robbed and different bad things happened. But what I think about is the immense weave and fabric of all the human beings in all of the whole place who didn't kill each other, who helped each other across the street, who carried a cup of water to each other, who did all this stuff, which is the really bigger backdrop of what's all there. It's what the human thing is about, And then I cheer up from that, because in a way that awful stuff is kind of exceptional. It's exceptional. It can get in a state like it is in Syria where it seems to be the order. But I did hear a talk last summer from someone who came from there, and they showed a video that they had taken in Aleppo or someplace. And there's a whole bunch of young people who are not joining any of the troops. They call themselves the White Helmets. They're not UN, they're not organized, they have no backing. But what they do is they go where someone drops a bomb and they try to pull people out of rubble, carry them to hospitals and do things. And that's their reaction to this insanity, is to try to be compassionate with people that they don't even know, no matter who they are, of which side. So that's still happening even in the middle of that. And, I don't know why it's like that. Maybe it's because Obama didn't let John McCain parachute in. Along with John Boehner and all the other Republicans. I thought he should have let them go. I would prefer they were there than in the Congress screwing everything up. How about they just jump in and fix it since he's doing a bad job, they think. They go in there like, parachute in, John McCain. Hey, I've come from the Hanoi Hilton. Like, hey, let's not do that. I don't know, the people are stuck in some kind of cycle there. But you see, then again, someone like Avalokiteshvara, people get killed. That's not the end of them. Then they're reborn somehow. Then who helps them get reborn well? Who's doing that?
Who's on that subtle plane dealing with the migrations? Everyone's a migrant. You know, one of the Buddhist synonyms for a living being, a sentient being, is a migrant. But they say, they have an expression, you know, Mrityu Chavana in Sanskrit, or Chipoa in Tibetan, to migrate through death. So death is a migration into another form of life. And who helps them in that time when that's a very crucial transition, when you can be reborn as a butterfly or another human or whatever, depending on what your instincts and what your habits have been, and whether you're kind or whether you're vicious or whatever you are, you gravitate toward a form that expresses your habitual feeling. Even if you die in an ugly setting, if you have a habitual underlying feeling, it will guide how you go. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going wild and speculating. I think it's actually more or less time. It's 9:06.
Is there time to ask questions?
What?
Is there time to ask questions?
Yes, oh yes, you, of course you have a question.
In the Heart Sutra, the voidness is matter, matter, voidness, and so on. I was thinking about the difference between Prasangika and the Svatantrikas.
Svatantrika.
And one difference that I understand is Prasangika thinks both the ultimate and conventional truth doesn't have any intrinsic nature, versus the Svatantrikas thinks there is some sort of
Conventional
intrinsic nature in the conventional reality. But in the Heart Sutra, it seems like it's almost the Prasangika way, right? It's the
well, that's what Prasangika thinks.
Matter. It's
Prasangika
like
thinks that, yes.
So
And Svatantrikas are very, very advanced, high people, and because they're ready for everything to disappear under analysis too. But it's just when they come back then to the relative thing, they just think that the way things are in the relative in relation to their concepts for them, they're a little more strongly stuck there. They come up with this idea of conventional intrinsic identity or conventional. They won't really say conventional intrinsic reality. That they're going to rule out from the conventional. But identity, sort of the linguistic turn level, they'll try to keep that, so that your language seems to have some grounding and there's a real intrinsic referentiality. There's some kind of referent to your expressions and your ideas. So it's a very subtle, actually, thing. And they won't even necessarily put it forward, but the Prasangika says, oh, well, that's where you're stuck. So they want to say there's a real space like equipoise somewhere, and whereas there's one Lama, I was a teacher of mine late, he passed away, Taratoko, he was so great. He said the most brilliant thing. He said the reason that when you look for everything to be just the way it is, looking for the self or your nose or the atom or whatever it is, and you have a great space like equipoise disappearance, and that disappeared state seems like the absolute to you, the reason that happens is that your conventional relative self, which is the only one you ever had, has wrapped itself subliminally in being an absolute self. That when the absolute self kind of disappears, any kind of absolute specific self disappears, that last gasp of the absoluteness attaches itself to the disappearance. So it takes your conventional self with it, and the conventional self seems to disappear into an absolute state of nothing being there. And actually, this connects to those four formless realms, as they're called, or four immaterial realms in the Buddhist altered states. I shouldn't do that. The Buddhist alternate states phenomenology, you could say. And that was so smart of him, I think, actually, really. And that's a really big danger. And the good Zen teacher, they also get after that, and they call that when you get stuck in the demon ghost cave. When you get stuck in that, I disappeared, so I'm enlightened. My disappeared state was my enlightened state. So now I'm back here, I'm running around doing things, but I'm going to go back there. That's my safe house, is nowhere. And there's a lot of things. Like even in the Vimalakirti, they salute. You are the great Buddha, and you are with us here, and you're doing this and that, and you teach us there's no sign of anything in anything, anywhere, and you who stand nowhere. And even in the Mahayana idea of nirvana is the unlocated nirvana, which fits beautifully, actually, a little bit with the quantum idea of non-locality. But unlocated just means that it's everywhere. It's not in a particular relative location, but it's what everything is. Anyway, it's late, but that's it. Is that helpful? You know what, by the way, I have something to say to you. I've been thinking about you. And my friend in Boston, I'm sure I have it somewhere, but I don't know where it is. I will try to reach him. He recorded a whole set of classes on the essence of eloquence that I gave a few years ago when my brain still worked. And up at Columbia. And there's recordings of them, and they're kind of not such good audio quality and so on, but I'm going to try to find them for you especially. Did you ever send me an email requesting that sort of thing?
I asked you last time.
Yeah, but you never sent me email, so I don't even know your name.
Okay.
What?
I don't have your email, but
Okay. If you send me that, I will send you a link somehow to that. Maybe our wonderful Rebecca will put them somehow connected to Tibet House website. So I just thought of that some days ago. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day.